Can I just say one thing firstly? I love the name Eat Sleep Boxing Repeat.
Easily boxing repeat. We're back, myself, Niall and Owen, and we're here in big fight breakdown mode. We're reviewing cruiserweight world title action. Jay Opetaia defending his title against Huseyin Cinkara and the Gold Coast. Obviously, we're going to break that fight down for you. We're going to talk a little bit about the division generally, about this one in particular, and also we're going to give some predictions as well. So, thank you very much for joining me, Niall and Owen. Let's get straight into it for this one. I want to basically that we've talked about Joe Patel on the channel many times. We've hoped for fights that we maybe haven't happened yet. We've looked at possible opponents. So really, with that in mind, I want to get your thoughts on this fight. Sin Cara is not necessarily a well-known opponent. Could arguably be a bit of a mismatch. But I'm going to come to you, Niall, first, and really get your reaction to this fight, please.
Yeah, it's dreadfully disappointing. It really is. Like we can't sugarcoat it. Especially when we're talking about somebody like Joy Opetaia, who, he clearly is supremely talented. He is talented. He is quite possibly, we might get onto it later in the video, the best cruiserweight in the world. But his resume is just it. He's coming toward the end of his kind of his nine lives in terms of boxing fans that want to see him fight somebody of no, do you know what I mean? No kind of, not to sound too disrespectful to Hussein Cinkara, but the way people are talking about Joy Opetaia, you can't continue to fight this level of opposition, and you really can't. So yeah, it seems like a kind of a never-ending cycle of saying this on Joy Opetaia videos, but it is underwhelming. It really is dreadfully underwhelming. And yeah, we might get into kind of possible next steps after this later on in the video, but it's not a fight I'm looking forward to. And I don't mean to sound too negative, but I just don't think you have much choice in videos like this, to be honest.
I'm going to pick up on some threads that Niall mentioned. I'm going to ask you, do you agree with Niall that Apataya is the best cruiserweight, obviously, in the world? But do you also agree with him actually that he's coming to the end of this sort of nine lives, as Niall eloquently put it there, around sort of fighting opponents that aren't necessarily well known, aren't necessarily of note, as sort of this sort of, I suppose, subpar level of opposition. Do you agree with those things, or do you have a different opinion?
I agree, and I'd probably take it a step further. That 18 months ago, I was probably Opetaia's biggest fan, and now it's just getting a bit stale. It's not the best division, cruiserweights. I was looking through the rankings. Matus Masternak is still ranked. Badu Jack is still ranked within governing bodies, and that's within top 10, top 15. So I think that says a lot about where the current state of the cruiserweight division is. I was looking at one. I'm pretty sure Pat Brown's ranked top 15 and won already. He's had about four fights, fought no one, got a few knockouts, but I think that sums up the state of the division. Um, it's a somehow Sin Cara's number one with the IBF. So although I don't think any of it's Opetaia's fault, it's just criminal that someone who seems that could have potential superstar status, could bring big time boxing back to Australia from the likes of, the big nights with Costa Zoo. Um, so it's yeah, it's mental. Like he should be fighting much bigger names at this stage of his career. Almost 30 fights in, it's pretty disgraceful that we're having to even do any form of content around a fight like this. When it's Jaya Pataya, we should be. He's great content. He's a great fighter, but when it's Jaya Pataya, I want to be doing it around Ramirez for the sake of his career. Is going up to heavyweight. I just think it's a mental fight. I'm really intrigued to see people's opinions that obviously tune in and we'll be watching this video, especially Aussies. What do they think? And yeah, it's just mental for me that we're even Jaya Pataya is even still in this position and isn't in massive unification fights.
Yeah, no, I think I actually agree with you with both you lads on this. I think it's obviously a disappointing fight. Obviously, we cover it because Jabbatai's a big name. He's obviously a champion in the division, but it's not the sort of opponent we want to see him in with. I suppose it's interesting what you mentioned there, Owen, as well around Sin Cara being number one in the IBF. The IBF obviously have a sort of history of giving kind of fringe names almost like opportunities in world title fights like this. But I look at they've got Billum Smiths at three at the IBF. Masternak's at 4. You look at it and go like, they're for both of them, like both of those guys to beat this guy as well. So it just seems to me like an odd sort of positioning, really. But if we're going to look at it, I suppose a bit objectively, I mean, like you said, it's a very weak division. Let's not pretend that we're Cinkara super fans on this channel. I mean, would you just to sort of get your kind of quick reaction to this one? Would you have him as a sort of top 10, top 20 realistically, Niall, in this division? Or do you think the division's so weak that you could almost pick the top four and then have no one, anyone, any man and his dog after that in the top sort of 5 to 15?
Yeah, I think to be honest, I think you nailed it there with the latter part of what you said. To be quite honest with you, it's a weird one. Like you have Opetaia and Zurdo who are just levels ahead of everybody else seemingly, and then it is very poor. You mentioned the IBF has, the IBF rankings are very interesting across divisions, really, not just cruiserweight, but yeah, it's a strange one. You can definitely say top 15, I'd say, for Sin Cara, but that's not saying an awful lot. You know what I mean? As you said, we're not claiming to be Sin Cara super fans here. But, coming on to this video, I did kind of watch a bit, watch a bit of him just to see what he's about. Decent hand speed, decent body puncher by the looks of it. Just okay, he's an okay fighter, but nothing more than that from what I've seen. So yeah, top 15 for me, but it's not saying much. The cruiserweight division is severely lacking at the minute outside of that kind of top top two really. As you say, Matthias Masternak is still knocking about there at the kind of upper echelons of the division, and that kind of tells you all you need to know as well. But yeah, Hussein Cinkara, not even really a household name in his own household, as the old saying went. But yeah, I just think you can kind of put him in top 15 kind of safely. But there's nobody kind of hugely world class that he has to fight for those positions with.
No, and I'll pick up something you mentioned as well. Like you mentioned obviously around wanting to see Opetaia with some of those names at the top of the division, and also mentioned possibly the fact that it was a bit criminal that he was in this division. So I'll come to you and ask really, what do you expect really from, what would you like to see from Jay Opetaia maybe the next year, the next 18 months? Do you think he should move up? Would you like to see him fight Ramirez? What sort of things? If you're trying to plan, I suppose, the rehabilitation really of Jay Opetaia's CV, how are you sort of pitching it over the next 18 months?
I think he's got to go up to heavyweight. It's for me, obviously, obviously he's got the Bradis win, but if Opetaia was sort of, maybe 5, 6 years older, then he could have been in with Gassiev, Bradis, Usyk, even Dorticos that was floated about. Would is much better than the majority of cruiserweights that are in the current crop. So I think he's just unlucky with timing, but he has openly stated, obviously, he wants the Zerdo Ramirez fight, and for some reason, I remember I interviewed Opetaia, spoke to his management when they fought Jordan Thompson a good few years back now, and they were targeting the WBO. I'm not sure if it's big down under in that part of the world. They love the WBO maybe, but that was what they were targeting. Doesn't seem to be happening. So get him up at heavyweight. There can be some huge nights in Australia, some huge nights in Riyadh. Take your pick wherever you want it. I think he is a draw. I think he could defo compete up at heavyweight, and especially for him again, the heavyweight division is changing. It's going to be a lot less competitive by the time he goes up. Some of the bigger names, your Furies, Anthony Joshua. I daren't even say his name after the news that he's fighting Jake Paul. So that shows where he's at with his career. Um, so yeah, there's no better time for Opetaia to go up and try his luck at heavyweight before Moses Atalma sweep the division up. But for me, not even the next 18 months, if he's not going to get the Ramirez fight, get him up at heavyweight for his next fight. I've been saying with myself and anyone on the channel when we're doing Opetaia related content, we've been saying it for a long period now that if these big fights ain't coming at cruiserweight, get him up. So yeah, I hope and expect to see him moving up because even the likes of name there, Jordan Thompson, Ellis Sorrow, this fight, what are they doing for Jai Opetaia? Absolutely nothing.
Yeah, no, Niall, just picking up on that as well. Then, do you agree with Owen that it should be either Ramirez or move up, or would you maybe like to see Opetaia at least, stick around at cruiserweight, try and pick up some unifications, or would you rather see, maybe even pick up a Bridgerweight belt on his way to the to the heavyweight division? And how do you see it? How do you see the next 18 months potentially in your idealised world for Joe Opetaia?
Totally in agreement with Owen. He's at the stage now that he has to move up. I said it before the last fight against Claudio Scao, I believe his name was, that if he didn't get the Zurdo fight next, he had to move up, and he obviously hasn't. So I just think he has to. He's running out of good grace with people who did defend him. As Owen said, he used to be one of his biggest fans, and that patience has just run very thin. But yeah, he has to go up if he can't get that big fight. A lot of Opetaia, a lot of Opetaia fans jump into the comments on these videos when we kind of criticize him and say, well, the likes of Billum Smith avoided him, and such and such avoided him. That might be true, but there comes a point where you have to kind of force these fights to happen, and that can only be an excuse for so long. Obviously, Opetaia, he's not ducking anyone. He's not scared of anyone, but he has to kind of force these big fights through now. If it's not Zurdo or Ramirez next, you look at, we're recording this video the week of David Benavidez' fight against Anthony Yard. You look what Benavidez did. He couldn't get the Canelo fight, moved up, making these big fights happen now at light heavyweight. Opetaia needs to do the same. And there's Owen said, which is a good point, those belts are going to become fragmented quite soon. You'd imagine, well, they already did with Fabio Wardley and Usyk, vacating that. But there's a lot of fascinating fights for Joy Opetaia at heavyweight. And as Owen said, he can compete. But even like at fringe world level, there's a lot of really interesting tests, but it has to be next. If Joy Opetaia's next fight gets announced and it's not either Zurdo or Ramirez or a move to heavyweight, I just think I'm done with him, to be honest with you. Until he proves me otherwise, I'm finished with him, to be quite honest.
No, I think you made some great points there, Niall. Actually, I think the Benavidez example is a really good one. Actually, if someone who didn't want to hang around moved up and obviously started making some bigger fights himself rather than hang around with the likes of Canelo. I think I don't know, my maybe it's one of those ones up a time where you need sort of Turkey to almost get behind him and start throwing money at some opponents and make these sort of fights happen, to be honest, rather than leaving it to other people. But you mentioned there as well, obviously Owen mentioned, and you mentioned there, Niall, as well, around how some of the sort of good grace of his fans might be being somewhat exhausted. And now, sorry, as Owen, as you initially said, you were a big fan of Jai Patai. I was wondering, there was a point initially where people were looking at Joe Opetaia possibly a couple of years ago and going, we've got possibly a top 10 fighter on our hands here. Like technically, beautiful boxer, lovely, love the movement, could really dominate the division and really sort of make a run for himself. But when where just gonna get your sort of comments really on where you kind of see Joe Opetaia now, Owen, sort of in a sort of rankings, a pound for pound rankings. Is he sort of top 10 for you, top 15, top 20, or do you have him sort of in the wilderness just because he hasn't fought anyone that you can kind of rank him against?
Um, Inability and what he could do is comfortably top 15, pushing top 10. At the minute, he's in the wilderness. If you look at his run of fights and who he's fought, when he fought Jordan Thompson and Ellis Sorrow, I thought, okay, it's a money maker. It's got him over to England. We'll see how he deals with them. And the poor fellas, fair play to them, they got absolutely fed to the wolves on those nights. I'm sure they got weighed in nicely, but they didn't get weighed in nicely enough because they just got spanked. Levels were shown. And that for me is when you have to take those sort of walkover style fights, it's how you deal with them. And he just battered the pair of them. So it's like, okay, we know what level he should be at. That's almost a statement of don't put these guys in with me again. Someone's going to get hurt. And although this fight is probably not of that level, it's not far off in terms of what Opetaia should be. So it's mental to say he's out in the wilderness, but in the terms of pound for pound rankings, when you've got the likes of like Bam, for example, who's just working his way up, who some people, before the Sonny Edwards fight, people have said he was a pound for pound fighter, maybe not. Post Sonny Edwards, you are looking at a pound for pound fighter. So that's the examples we look at. When he beat Bradis the first time with a broken jaw for 9 rounds or whatever it was, that's like, okay, Bradis might not be what he was but he's still a good fighter, especially to do that against, and just nothing since. So it's a bit crazy to say he's out in the wilderness. He shouldn't be, but I do think he needs a couple of big names in a row to get that pound for pound status back by his name.
No, would you agree? I mean, I'm not looking. You don't have to give a sort of top 15 or your top 10, but just do you agree with the sentiment there around Owen? Do you think it currently in the wilderness needs at least one or two names to even talk about top 15? Obviously, we've got the ones like Inoue, Crawford, obviously, even Shakur, Bivol, all those sort of guys that sort of kicking around. Do you think he needs a couple of big names to get anywhere near the sort of top 15? How do you have him?
Yeah, absolutely. Nowhere near the top 10 anyway. Definitely not top 10. To be honest with you, I think Joy Opetaia, if you asked him this question himself, I think he's honest enough to say that he's not top 10 yet, purely based on resume. I agree with what Owen said. Clearly, bags of ability. I know a lot of people, well, maybe myself, kind of, I might have drank the Kool-Aid a little bit in terms of what he done to Jordan Thompson and Ellis Zorro. No disrespect to them, but they shouldn't be anywhere near kind of world championship level at cruiserweight. Jack Massey, decent European level fighter, no more than that. But yeah, I just think he definitely has the ability, but he needs those wins. You know, I know most people would say that um, Joy Opetaia is the best cruiserweight in the world, but you look at even Zurdo Ramirez, kind of what he done to Chris Billum Smith. Say what you want about Chris Billum Smith, but that's a much better win than anything Joy Opetaia has done recently. The Bradis wins are good wins, but as Owen, as you said, first one, Braid is a little bit past his best, and the second Braid is, after being inactive, after being obsessed with Jake Paul, and Braid has still had him scrambling in those last few rounds. He still had him worried. So, the question does still linger when he steps up against, you know, the likes of a Zurdo Ramirez or any sort of world class fighter that he can look as impressive as he has against Thompson, Zorro, Massey, but yeah, definitely not deserving of top 10 pound for pound, yeah.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. I think, yeah, you got to obviously, like Owen picked up there, obviously, and ability wise and sort of potential you could have Jay Opetaia sort of should be around the top 10, top 15, but you got to have some sort of a position to sort of calibrate this against. And no, you make the great point there as well, actually, around Zella Ramirez and Chris Billum Smith and the sort of recency. And maybe we should sort of take a look really and think, actually, it seems like Opetaia is number one in the division, but is that justified? I mean, yes, potentially again on potential, but you need someone in there to sort of prove that. So yeah, that's a very interesting point. But guys, we have to now unfortunately move on to predictions. We're probably going to be aligned with these predictions. Actually what we've said so far. But I'm going to start with you, Nab, because obviously you've done the research. You've done the research on Cinkara, about good hand speed, decent body puncher. So you may be able to offer something that I think I don't want to speak ill of myself or Owen, but I'll put words in Owen's mouth. But I haven't done too much watching of Cinkara. So you are actual specialist, Niall, when it comes to Sin Cara. Your prediction might carry more weight than the other two here. But well, how do you see this one going, Niall? Who wins this and how?
I think specialist might be a big word for this, but we are going to be aligned. I'll try and keep it as short as I can. It is Opetaia. It is by stoppage. Whenever he wants, really. But I'll say for round four stoppage. Sin Cara, as I say, seems to have very quick hands, decent body puncher. But from what I've seen, the very little that I've seen, he does leave himself open. Leaves himself open coming in, carries his hands low, and leaves himself very open throwing combinations. So I just think Opetaia too posed, too calculated, and he'll get him out there in 4 rounds for me.
Owen, I'm not going to put words in your mouth and say that you think that Opetaia is going to win this fight. But if you do, are you going to go earlier or later than Niall in that prediction?
Just to be pedantic, I'll go around later because I do think it'll be similar. So I'll go round five off Tyre. Again, I'm not going to say I've watched every single fight Sin Cara's had. I've watched a few clips of him ahead of this video, and yeah, I think like Niall said, body work seems okay, but his decent body work against the level of fighters where he's got his chin wide open, they're not Jaya Pataya. Regardless of his level of opponent, regardless of how he's fought over his last few fights, if you leave an open chin for someone that carries power and accuracy like that, you're going to sleep. So it wouldn't surprise me if it's over in a couple, but I think Sin Cara might try and tie him up early survive a few rounds, and then Opetaia will get frustrated and just bingo him pretty much. So yeah, I'll go Opetaia, round 5.
Yeah, you know what? We are aligned on this, lads. I think we're looking at a Jay Opetaia unanimous stoppage victory coming in here. I think again that you can almost be kind of when you want, but I think the sort of the first half of the fight, I like that one. To be honest with you, somewhere 4 to 6, I think is solid predictions. I mean, look, Cinkara is what 40 years old. He's fought pretty much exclusively in Germany. This is the first, this is I think the second 12-round fight he's ever had sort of on his resume. Yes, he carries power, but the first 12-rounder he had, it was over in 2 rounds. So we don't even know how far he can necessarily go. Yeah, right, he might be able to punch hard, but as you said with the Breedis one, Opetaia is showing grit and obviously he's also elusive and a different sort of beast than the names that Cinkara's been in with. So yeah, I agree with you, lads. We are aligned. Guys, let us know what you think, really. I mean, like Owen and Niall have both said, we get a lot of comments in here from Jay Opetaia fans. Let us know, pick up on anything that we've said, like and subscribe to the channel, but feel free to engage with anything we've said in this. Let us know whether you think Jay Opetaia should move up, whether he should stay at the division, whether people are avoiding him, whether his career disappointing you, whether you're all in on the Jay Opetaia big time boxing in Australia. But Niall, Owen, that's all we've got time for, sadly. Guys, thank you very much for joining me. And always, guys, thank you very much for watching.
Cheers, take care.
Cheers, mate.